yourself and your family from modern cyber threats. This course will be covering all of your bases in a step-by-step manner. You will learn how to easily and conveniently manage your passwords. You will learn how to dodge phishing scams. You will learn how to vaccinate yourself from those pesky computer viruses so your computer keeps running smoothly like it was that shiny, brand new computer you first bought. You will learn how to browse securely so no one can spy on you. And you will learn how to keep hackers out so your identity and your personal things remain safe and untouched. But here's why this course really stands out from all the rest. This course helps you take your security to the next level by actually showing you how the bad guys operate. You will see in each lesson something I dubbed a bad guy moment, where you see hackers in action. And you will emerge from this course understanding exactly why what you're learning in this course is the perfect guide to staying secure in today's world. And you'll be learning all this from a world-renowned cybersecurity expert. So come on, enroll now in the best course out there for home cybersecurity. The bad guys aren't waiting. In this section, you're going to learn how to make your own life easier and more secure by following some simple, smart password management principles. In particular, we are going to discuss how to avoid the most common password pitfalls that odds are you might be making right now. I'm going to show you in real time so you can see for yourself how easy it is for hackers to crack mismanaged passwords. Finally, I'm going to show you how to manage your passwords easily and in an orderly manner so that you can be both secure and time efficient. In this video, I'm going to show you how password cracking takes place. I'm going to show you how easy it is to crack a simple password that a person generates, and how much harder it is to crack a password that's been automatically generated, so that you understand why those annoying password requirements exist. So I have here two documents, and what I'm showing you here is that the first one opens with the password, and the other one requires a complicated password that's been generated by a password generator. Both documents are fake bank account statements, and as you can see, they're password encrypted. So now I'm going to try and crack their passwords. So I'm going to do a little bit of pre-processing work, take just a little bit, and then I'm going to basically enumerate commonly used passwords, commonly used patterns, and so on and so forth. And I'm not even going to use anything specific to my case or any work on my part. I'm simply going to use what's existent out there, just a off-the-shelf password cracker, and you can see this is how fast it took to crack the password. In orange, that's the password, it is password, and it took less than a second. Now I'm going to try to crack the second PDF that has an automatically generated password. So you can see it's already taken a few seconds and nothing has come up as the password, and we're going to wait. And while this is happening, I'm going to elaborate on how password crackers work. Like I mentioned, they use various patterns, they use common keywords, but they also have various ways of stringing these together. So for instance, you might think you're extremely clever when your password uses numbers where you might have used characters originally, like if your name is John, then you use a 0 for O, but this is already something that the password crackers take into account, and they will try out the common words and phrases by replacing the characters with their digit counterparts, so-called leet speak. There's also other various ways to put the phrases and words together, like putting John but backwards, or maybe some part of the password is forward, some part of the password is backwards, and all sorts of other variations. But as you can see, we've been running the password cracker for quite a while, a few minutes now, on the second document, and still nothing has come up. So now you can see why it's much harder to crack the passwords that are recommended, like passwords that tell you use special characters, have at least 16 characters, do this and that. It's not because they want to be annoying, it's because it makes a huge difference and it slows down the cracking, and at this point I aborted the cracking because it's taking too long. Okay, so let's talk about some of the main password management pitfalls out there and why they're actually security threats or simply extremely inconvenient and inefficient. So first one I want to touch on is using sticky notes to write down your password and then sticking them onto the screen. I think it is pretty clear that you are creating a risk whenever someone can access your desktop. They can simply copy down the password and then use it to their volition. In addition, it gets tedious to have like 100 sticky notes on your screen. It's getting in the way. They fall, the wind takes them off. You need to write them down in case you need to log in from a different device or a different place. So the post-it sticky password management approach is perhaps not the best approach that's out there. The second pitfall that people often fall into is recycling their passwords. And I can understand why they do that. I used to do it as well back in the day. You don't want to memorize like a million passwords and remember which password belongs to what. Is it my birthday for my email, or is it like my mom's birthday for my Facebook, or is it my first dog's name for my bank account? It's impossible to remember all of this. And so people resort to one password they remember, John Doe 123 birthday exclamation mark, and then they use it over and over again for every account. You don't have to think, you just use that password. It's like automatic. The problem is that if one account gets compromised, all accounts are going to be compromised. And hackers know that people often reuse passwords. So they know if I've compromised someone's Facebook account, once I do that, well, now I'm going to try and attack all the rest of the accounts. Hackers know that if they're able to compromise one account, odds are really good that you are using the same password over and over again, and now they're going to look at all of your accounts and try out this password, or at the very least similar variations. So for a hacker, this is like low-hanging fruit, easy pickings. Once one account's compromised, the rest of them will probably follow. Third pitfall that people often fall into is using easy passwords. Now, when I say easy, unfortunately nowadays that means almost any password that you come up with that's based on your own information. It's probably easy. If you use your name, your birth date, if you put them backwards, if you replace the characters with corresponding digits like O with 0 or 1 or L with 1, all those various things are considered very easy because they can be automatically enumerated, all combinations of them taken, and a correct guess generated. So nowadays, anything that you generate yourself in this way is probably easy, and what you should do to solve all three of these pitfalls is use a password manager, as well as try to increase your number of authentications to 2-factor or even more. So we are going to discuss how a password manager allows you to solve these problems in the next lesson. In this video, we're going to run through an installation of a password manager, and I'm also going to show you how to use it just like I did to my mom. So I'm going to choose some password manager. I don't really have a strong preference, but I know this one is decent. I'm going to go with Bitwarden. I know it's convenient, it looks nice, it's straightforward to install. I've used other ones, I didn't have a strong preference. So all you do is go to the web page and then download it. So I'm using Windows, download it for Windows. If you're using a different operating system, you'll do a similar thing. It should be pretty straightforward. Wait for it to download, then install. And the installation process is pretty straightforward, pretty much, unless you have some specific reasons not to, just click next, next, next. So while this is installing, let's discuss the advantages of password managers and how to use them most efficiently. So the advantages are that you have one main password to access all of your accounts. And if you're an ordinary average internet user, you probably have like thousands of accounts. It might not seem that way, but each email has its own account. Each social network has its own account. Each time you buy something online, you need to create an account. Each time you subscribe for something, they might make you create an account. So all these things require their individual passwords, because when you do password reuse, you're endangering your accounts. If someone hacks one of your accounts, they'll take the password that's in that account, try to find the rest of your accounts, and then use that same passwords. For that reason, we don't like password reuse, so we want to generate a specific password for each account. So password manager lets you handle all of this in one place. You have one master password. Sometimes it's more than a password. Sometimes it's a combination of, let's say, a file that you have, or maybe your phone being used for a two-factor, or something else that allows you to access the whole master thing, the whole master account of yours. So now I'm generating my master password, and in case that you get it wrong, you have a chance to redeem yourself, because the master password and the retyped master password must be the same. But once you have the master password put in, then that's it. You'll probably not be able to recover it if you get it wrong. So you need to make sure you remember the master password, because it's your access to all of the rest of your accounts. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that it is very convenient to have your main password manager, its database, it's very convenient to have it synced among your various devices. For instance, I might have a phone that I want to use passwords in my password manager. I might also have whatever, an iPad, a different computer, and so on. So I want all of that to be synced. So you want to make sure you configure that. So now we've installed the password manager. So I'm going to show you how to input an account into it. So I'm going to go on some random website, let's say a website for phishing hobbyists, so fishbrain.com, and what I'm gonna do is sign up for an account. I'm gonna have a specific password that is generated automatically so that it is harder to crack, like you saw in the bad guy moment. Using passwords that humans come up with is much less secure than passwords that are automatically generated to look as random as possible. So I'm going to sign up, I'm going to put in some email that I'm going to get rid of, and then I'm going to now generate the password. So what you do is just add a new entry into your password manager, and it's just a database. It'll have a bunch of these. Put in the username, and now we generate a password. So I just click this recycle key or generation or whatever it is, say yes, and then I'm going to use this password, which has been generated for me, and I know that it satisfies a bunch of hardiness constraints. It's random, it has maybe special characters and all sorts of things, and that's it. So I now have an account, my password is saved into my password manager, and now I'm going to show you how to use it. So let's say that you logged out, you're now running a new session and you want to log in. How do you use your password manager? Well, you unlock your password manager. That's just something you do using your username and the master password like we did when we set it up. And then you open it up, find the correct entry. In this case, I'm looking for Fishbrain, and I copy the username. I don't even have to type it. Sometimes it gets automatically populated depending on your password manager, and then copy the password, sign in. That's it. I didn't have to go through the tedious typing. Everything is easy. In this lesson, I'm going to tell you about multi-factor and two-factor authentication. So imagine that you're logging in into your favorite website, your email, your Facebook, something like that. As you do so, you're going to receive some text or a phone call or some other message, usually to your phone, depending on what you have set up. Then you check this other message, other communication, and you're going to input it into your login. You'll be asked, what text did we send you? What code? So you put it in, and that's how you complete the login. More generally, there are other ways to get authenticated, not just your phone, but perhaps your fingerprint or your voice, etc., etc. And the goal here is to prevent people from logging in as you if they have only your password. Because in order to log in as you, when you have multi-factor authentication set up, they need to have those other things. They need to have access to your phone, or your fingerprint, or your voice. Welcome to the section on phishing, where you're going to learn how to become immune to phishing scams. In this section, I want to show you how to avoid the most common phishing scams that are out there right now, so you, your family, and your personal information can be safe from the bad guys. I'm also going to show you, for real, how the bad guys utilize phishing and how easy it is to steal personal information, so you can see concretely what the threat is. And finally, I'm going to teach you several techniques for authenticating URLs, phone calls, and other phishing methods, so you can be at ease knowing that you are safe.
Starbucks.
Hi, this is John from the corporate office with Starbucks.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, pretty good. I was just calling. We were having problems with people calling in and pretending they're the corporate office, and we just wanted to let you know that if anyone calls in and says they're with the corporate office, just not to give them any information and not to believe them.
Okay.
Because apparently people have been calling in and, just making prank calls, I assume.
Okay, great.
Okay, and who's this?
Okay, thanks for letting us know.
Sure. Who's this I'm speaking with? And your last name?
Don, R-E-M-O-N-T.
Okay, and what's your employee number, or I guess we could look it up by your cell phone number, whatever phone number's on file with us.
Wait, you just want my partner numbers?
Sure.
1-3.
Okay, but do you have a phone number? Because that's the easiest way to look up your file here.
68.
Let's start by understanding what phishing is and how it happens. Phishing is basically when a criminal attempts to steal a victim's confidential information using some medium or some channel. And the channels are varied. It can be by email, it can be by text, phone call, it can be in person. For instance, they might put on a costume and pretend to be someone they're not. And of course, the consequences can be quite grave. They can be identity theft, they can be breaches, and they can be the loss of intellectual property. Now let's go into more detail about the most common types of phishing, the ones you will probably encounter in your daily life. The most common one is probably phishing emails. If you look in your mailbox, you probably get these every day. Every day, someone is trying to steal your private information or trick you into doing something that is not in your best interest. So here I'm showing you an email I got. As you can see, it's coming from someone that I don't know, just based on the fact that they're introducing themselves. You can see there's like a whole story going on that's supposed to be very persuasive. And there's always an opportunity, because the way you're being phished is by either creating some desire in you, usually greed, or manipulating and pushing you via fear. So maybe they'll say that, as you'll see in the next few examples, maybe you owe some taxes. But in this case, we have something like 47 million euros waiting this person's instruction. The person doesn't know me and apparently is very motivated to contact me and wants me to invest, I guess. I'm not even sure. It's too long, too ridiculous to even look at. But the point is, these emails get to me and they get to you as well. And even though usually your email will be able to detect them as spam, that is not always the case. And you have to be cautious about that, especially if the phishing email has been tailored to you. So for instance, to make phishing more effective, perpetrators can try and use information about you in the emails. For instance, this perp could have said, "Dear Emmanuel, you probably forgot me since the last conference that we both attended, and maybe look at a conference that I mentioned that I attend," and so on and so forth. And that makes it much more convincing. And then I'm more likely to read this and more likely to respond, and so on and so forth. So that is something to keep in mind. Another important thing to note is that these phishing messages or emails will often have a link that you're supposed to click, and this link, as you can see in this example, appears to be legitimate but is usually an imposter of something that you trust. For instance, this might be an imposter Twitter, or the link that you're seeing is not actually the link that you're being sent to. So you think you're going to this thing which is written there, but actually you might be sent to a different link. I'll show you an example of an imposter website in a moment, but before doing so, let's also listen to a very common scam, which is phone calls that involve various government agencies and you being in trouble. And these are very effective because, well, one, they might be actually correct in the sense that maybe you do owe taxes, maybe you are in trouble with the IRS. Secondly, it is very difficult to verify anything because contacting these government agencies is a pain in the butt. They'll put you on hold forever, or they won't answer, or they won't know what you're talking about. It's always very difficult to deal with the government agencies. And finally, because these are so scary, they're going to put you in an emotional state and you're probably going to make a mistake. So let's listen to a Social Security scam. So it's a voicemail.
From Federal Database. Call immediately at our headquarters number 91434865007. I repeat, 91434865007. Social Security Deputy Officer is waiting for your call back.
Next thing I want you to be aware of for your own protection is something called URL shortening. So what I'm showing you right now is some URL, and then by looking at it, we have no idea what it is. So I'm going to type it in to my browser, and we'll see what it actually leads to. And what it leads to is Google. So this URL shortener is actually Google's webpage. But I could have put almost anything as the destination of this URL. So just by looking at a URL, you cannot tell what it is. And this is definitely a trick that is used in phishing. So a message might say, "Oh, I saw your picture on this website. Nice, that's so cool." Or, "Did you see what Trump said?" Or, "Did you see what Kim Kardashian just did?" Whatever it is. And then put in this URL. And because you cannot tell where this URL is going, you can't tell if it's actually dangerous. So keep this in mind. You cannot tell just by looking at a URL where you're going to end up. Finally, I want you to be aware of web page impersonations. So I'm going to type in some web page and go to it. And this web page looks like it belongs to Microsoft, and it's a sign-in page, and you might be tempted to put in your personal credentials to your Microsoft account. But that would be a mistake because it is an impersonation page and it's not actually a Microsoft page. It is a convincing copycat. And these types of pages pop up all the time. They're being created all the time, thousands of them every hour, and then taken off very quickly before they're detected, before they populate the blacklists out there. So you can easily fall prey to one of these web pages because they're always new. There's always ones that haven't been seen before, and you are being led to them using various scams and tricks. So now that you're aware of the many ways in which crooks are trying to phish people, let's discuss what can be done to stay safe. Now that we've learned about the many ways in which phishing can take place, let's discuss what you can do to prevent yourself from being phished. How to protect yourself. Well, the most important principle you can learn is to only click something or respond to something if you know where it's from, if you know what it is, with great certainty. Take, for example, phishing phone calls. They will often pretend to be a government agency. So what you can do is, instead of responding to their call directly or calling them back in the number that they suggest, find out independently the number of the agency and then call that number so that you know for sure that you're reaching the agency and not someone who's pretending to be that agency. Similarly, if a link is looking unfamiliar, don't click it because it can be risky, especially if it's coming from someone you don't know. But even if it's coming from someone you do know, you have to be very careful because people's accounts do get hacked. I had friends send me random links from their WhatsApp or from their email that evidently weren't actually from them, but were them having their account hacked. So don't click unless you're very sure that it's safe. Another thing to do is never give your personal information unless you double checked that you really are speaking to the correct person. So like I mentioned, make sure that you found the number independently, call them, and verified that it really is the company or agency or individual that you think you're calling and not someone pretending to be them. And more generally, don't hesitate to take your time and think carefully before you give away your information. Don't let anyone pressure you. Don't rush. It's not worth the risk of having your identity stolen and all sorts of crazy bills appearing in your name and huge hassle of recovering your credit and fixing your life after you found out that there's a loan for a car in your name that you never bought. So exercise caution. Now, another interesting new development to keep in mind is that phishing is getting more sophisticated. And one of the tools that's being used is AI to make the phishing look more convincing. For example, last year there was a case of phishing where fraudsters used voice impersonation using AI to copy the CEO's voice. So basically they called someone in the company, they used the voice of the CEO, which they impersonated using AI, and that lets them say anything they want, but with the voice of the CEO. And then they managed to phish and persuade this person to wire them like $250,000. So keep in mind going forward that just because someone's voice sounds correct doesn't mean that it is actually them. So be very, very cautious, especially when you have responsibility over large amounts of assets. Now, I want to show you an additional technique for double checking URLs in your daily life. And this should be your secondary layer of protection if you really do think that this URL is safe, but you want to make absolutely sure, then you can go to a website called virustotal.com. I'm not affiliated with it. It's actually owned by Google, or the same company that owns Google. And what you can do is click URL and then submit the URL that you're considering visiting, and then you'll see a score. You'll see a bunch of reports of antiviruses looking at this URL, and you can see also the community's score and reputation given to this URL, and other interesting information that can help you determine if this URL is legitimate or malicious. So in this case, you're seeing the URL that I've showed you that's impersonating a Microsoft URL, and it is not legitimate. So keep all this in mind in your daily life. Stay safe. All you have to do is be patient, don't let anyone rush you, figure out what's true and what's false, take your time, and you should be safe. Welcome to the section on malware, your malware vaccination. This section is arguably the most important one. Malware is probably the most devastating, most common, most important threat that you and I face in the digital age. In this section, our goals are, first, to understand better and to recognize the many destructive malware that pose a threat to you and your family and your data and your daily activities. We are going to discuss the different types of malware out there, how they operate, and how they cause havoc. I'm also going to show you, for real, how malware operates. I'm going to show you a ransomware infection devastating a device, and I'm also going to show you a keylogger that is auditing the keystrokes of a user. Finally, we're going to discuss some of the smartest, most effective, best practices to keep yourself secure from the threat of malware. So like I said, this section is the most important one and can mean the difference between a whole lot of trouble and safe and pleasant computer usage. So let's get started. In this section, I'm going to show you a real demo of a ransomware attack. So I have here a sample of a ransomware. In real life, it's not going to have a code as its name, but it might pretend to be a friendly installer, say Angry Birds version 2. So I run it and you can see created a bunch of files. These files are instructions for recovery, and now I'm going to check what files have been encrypted to see what's working and what's not. So initially I just showed you a file with an image called Shiny, and it hasn't yet been encrypted. But as time goes on, now you can see a bunch of changes have taken place, and that's because it encrypts in a certain order. It starts deep in your file system and then propagates to your desktop so that you only see your desktop files being encrypted at the very end once all the damage has been done. You can see it also changed the screen wallpaper, and now there is a message that says that your files have been encrypted. There's a time left timer, there's a payment will be raised timer, there's a Bitcoin address, and now I'm going to test out the files to see that indeed they're no longer operational. So you can see they have this extension of WannaCry at the end. That's the name of the sample, WannaCry. And even if you were to remove this extension, you'll see that the files are not going to work. So this is that shiny image I showed you earlier. Now that I open it after the encryption, well, it just doesn't open. And you can try it with the remaining files, and you'll see that even removing the extension is not going to restore them. They're now encrypted. The only way to get them back is to decrypt them. To decrypt them, you need to know a special code. The special code is only known to the malware author. So for that reason, they are able to blackmail you with a certain amount of Bitcoin that you pay to the address that they give you. So you can see here a PDF not working. So this is how a ransomware attack looks. You can see it's pretty brutal, it's fast, encrypts everything, terrorizes you, it threatens to increase the price, it threatens to remove files, and you actually have no guarantee that you will get your stuff back even if you pay. So that's malware for you. It's no joke. Take it seriously. What you're going to be seeing now is a demonstration of a keylogger. A keylogger is basically a malware that sits around on your computer and listens to all the keystrokes that you are making and then records this information and sends it out to the hacker. So in this case, I just ran the keylogger. Next thing I'm going to do is go and log in into my email. So I'm going to type in my email information like an ordinary user. Typing in the username, hit next. Then I'm going to type in my password, which I'm showing you for the purpose of demonstrating how a keylogger works. Of course, this account will be disabled by the time you see this video. And then I log in, and now I'm going to pretend to be writing a message, an email to my mom, telling her about how great things are right now. So let's pretend it's mom@gmail.com, and I'm typing in how life in the Bahamas is just great. So I'm typing my email, and while this is happening, you'll see that the keylogger is recording every single stroke I make, and even things that get deleted. Say I write a character, then I delete it, or I write some text and I delete it, that still gets recorded. Everything you do, your mistakes included, gets recorded. If you type in the wrong password into the wrong field, that will still be recorded. And then I'm going to ask for some money because, well, someone's going to pay for the vacation. And to show that I really do need money, I'm going to attach my bank account info. But of course, I'm extremely sensitive about security, so I'm going to password protect my bank account info, which I check now to make sure I remember the password correctly, that presumably my mom also knows. I'm going to attach it to the email. And when I did so, I typed in my password, which you'll see the keylogger also captured. So everything I did so far, everything is going to be captured by the keylogger. So let's take a look. I now look at the logs the keylogger made, and you can see hotmail.com. So it recorded which website I went to. It recorded the sequence of keystrokes, enter, tab, whatever it is. So the person listening into the keylogs knows which field I'm in. And then here's my email and the password. And now life in the Bahamas is great, etc., etc. And it records things and only writes them intermittently, otherwise it'll be easy to detect it. It writes things in chunks. So I'm gonna complete the current chunk, which will show you that it also got the password when I check my bank account. So I'm writing some message, finish up the message. Now let's take a look at the keylog. Once I have enough of a chunk, I have enough text that I feel comfortable that a chunk has been completed. So I'm writing me some notes. Download and install password manager, that's a good idea, and so on. And then let's go back to the keylogger, and you can see there it is, the password, which is password, but the point is it recorded everything that went on after that. Let's start by getting an overview of the most common, most malicious, most important malware out there. So I've broken down malware into 8 main categories. First category is Trojan. Trojan malware is named after the famous Trojan horse, and basically the idea is that the malware pretends to be a benign software, but then secretly it is up to no good. For example, let's say that you found a website that offers a free download of Photoshop or Microsoft Word. Naturally, you're excited, you're getting something for free that actually costs money, so you go ahead and download it and you install it, and everything seems fine, it even works, but behind the scenes, it might be doing something malicious. It might be sending your keystrokes to a hacker that's sitting out there waiting for various information to come in. It might be installing ads on your computer, or it might be granting this remote hacker access to your device to do whatever they please with it. And you might have no way of knowing what it's actually doing. So that is the first malware, quite terrifying. Next type is called ransomware. And ransomware encrypts all of your files or some selection of your files, meaning that it scrambles it up using some special code that only it knows. And if you want to access your files, you need to obtain this code. But the only way you're getting this code is if you pay the author of the ransomware. So basically you're being blackmailed to get your files and your information back, because this ransomware has encrypted all your data. Usually this takes place over some anonymous channel, like paying using Bitcoin, so that the criminal, the author of the ransomware, stays safe from police and from anyone else. Another type of malware is crypto miners. So you might be familiar with cryptocurrency, which is this electronic currency that is revolutionizing a lot of the way we transact. Well, when transactions take place, they need to be recorded. And this recording of the history of transactions is called mining, cryptocurrency mining. And it requires a lot of computation. Basically, a computer needs to be sitting there working on this problem, spinning its fan, heating up, and burning up a lot of electricity. So what malware authors do is they let their victims perform these computations and then collect the profits, collect the crypto that gets generated. So symptoms of being infected by a crypto miner are that your computer is working, but you don't seem to be doing anything. Maybe it's just sitting there idle, but it's still working and you don't understand why. What the heck is it doing? But it's working. There are other reasons that might be the case, but this is one of them. Next is adware. Basically, it is malware that starts harassing you with various ads, putting links into your web browser that you didn't look for, redirecting you, pop-ups, all sorts of things that are very unpleasant. That is adware. Spyware is a malware that spies on you, so that could be in the form of sending copies of your documents. It can be in the form of taking pictures of you with your webcam. It can be just recording which applications you use. It can be anything that the malware author has designed the spyware to do. Worms are malware that propagates. In the past few years, we've seen massive outbreaks of malware that had worm-like behavior. For instance, WannaCry quickly propagated across countries and networks and caused millions, billions, whatever it is, of damage because it has worm-like properties. So even if you don't necessarily commit a mistake, like download something or run something, some malware will still manage to propagate across the network and infect people, innocent people, you could say, in the sense that they haven't made any mistakes. There's also keyloggers, another type of malware. Keyloggers log what you type on your keyboard. So they are a form of spyware, but a particularly common one, so I've singled them out. And basically that could mean that someone steals your passwords, someone is seeing what you're chatting, and anything else that you're doing on your computer. And finally, rootkits, which roughly speaking take root in your system and you don't even know they're there. It might be difficult to get rid of them if you do know that they're there, but they're just sitting there. They have control if they want to, and they're able to do whatever they want. They're kind of like a sleeper agent that can be activated at a moment's notice and then will cause all sorts of havoc. So that is a rootkit. So evidently malware can ruin your day. Now the question is, how does malware even infect people? So there are several main vectors of attack for malware authors. The first is when a user, such as yourself, downloads something. And if this downloaded software is malware, then you now have malware on your device. And if you run it, then you are infected. However, not all malware needs to be run in order for it to infect you. For instance, as you've seen in the bad guy moments, just having a USB plugged into your device will infect you if the USB is properly configured with malware that will auto-infect. More generally, sometimes you don't even have to do anything. Just being connected will get you infected. There are famous instances of malware that execute because you have Windows, or because you were connected to someone else who was infected and you had Windows XP, for example. Or maybe your software wasn't updated fully and it had some vulnerabilities remaining. So sometimes it's not what you do, it's what you have or what you didn't do. So having certain software or connectivity with other people who are infected, or not patching your software, which you should always do. You should always patch to the latest for security purposes. If you're not extremely confident that you know that this file is benign, that it hasn't
been in the hands of a malicious actor at some point, don't run it. The second principle, you should always keep your software up to date. And the reason is that software gets patched up not only to make it faster, more efficient, more in tune with consumer demand, and to fix bugs, but also to address vulnerabilities. And it's important to get the patches installed as soon as possible because hackers know the vulnerabilities will be patched, so they quickly look for ways to take advantage of these vulnerabilities, and while you're not patched, you have a security threat on your hands. And for your information, these vulnerabilities get compiled into massive lists that are easily filtered and searched. So for instance, a hacker might start sniffing around your network or your machine and find out that you're running program XYZ, let's say Flash version hypothetically 6.6, whereas the latest one is 6.8. Then they'll go to this website or use some tool and it'll tell them all the vulnerabilities that Flash 6.6 has, and then they'll try all of these or the most promising ones on your device. So for that reason, you want to be up to date. These vulnerabilities no longer work once your software is updated, so it's very important to do so. The next principle you should follow is backing up your data, especially important data, regularly. This is not only because computers can be unreliable, they can crash, they can corrupt the data when saving it, or while it's being transferred, or in a myriad of ways, but also because you could get infected with ransomware, and if you don't have a backup, you could be blackmailed for your data. Even if you do backup, you want to make sure that your backups are working, that your backups themselves are secure, because again, hackers are privy to these various techniques. They know that people back up, so they have routines in their malware that will go after the backed up data. So you want to make sure you have a smart system for backing up, and that you don't end up trying to recover your data only to find out your backups don't work. That's happened to many people many times. You don't want to be one of them. Next principle is install an antivirus. This will ensure that you're less likely to be infected by malware. It might even suggest some additional benefits like how to make your computer faster and more secure from other threats. Finally, one nice technique that you can use when you are looking at an unknown file and you're trying to decide whether you should run it, which is usually something you should be very cautious about if you're not an analyst, and that is using VirusTotal. So the way to do it is pretty simple. You just go online to a website called virustotal.com. So www.virustotal.com. This website is owned by Google, and let's say that you have some sample, in this case an unknown file that's on my desktop, and I don't know what it is. Should I run it or not? I'm not sure. So then I can upload it like so, and then I get a verdict, and you can see a lot of antiviruses are represented here, and they each give you a verdict. So it's like a crowdsourcing for antivirus. And in this case, this is obviously a malicious sample. In fact, it's WannaCry, and I definitely don't want to be running it. So you can use VirusTotal to give you a secondary opinion on files that you don't know. Maybe your friend sent you a PDF, you want to make sure that your friend hasn't been hacked and that the PDF isn't malicious. Then you can try and use this in addition to your own personal antivirus and any other investigations that you wish to do.
Let's take this opportunity to install an antivirus. So I've chosen some antivirus that's pretty well rated called Bitdefender. So I go onto the website, the main page for Bitdefender, and I'm going to click free download. Then I'm going to install it. And of course, like with all things, the paid version is usually better. In this case, more secure, has more features than the free version. But as a start, for demonstration, let's just start with the free version. So download it, I said next, and now I'm waiting for the download to finish. Next, we're going to be installing it. And now just continue, start installing it. And while this is happening, let's discuss antivirus. So the way antivirus works is it has different components that are meant to defend you from malware, and sometimes it has some extra things to defend you from other various security issues. So when it comes to malware, it might have a catalog of signatures. So all the previously seen malware that's been identified and recognized as such is basically stored in a database, and then the antivirus will look up whether some new file that you've downloaded, whether it is one of those previously seen malware. It might have other more clever methods for discovering if a file is malware using heuristics, machine learning, and so on and so forth. But that is the basics of an antivirus. Once you install it, it is recommended to run a system scan and then just let it defend you.
Welcome to the section on safe and secure browsing, where we are going to discuss how to browse the internet securely and safely, making sure that no one has access to your information without your consent. We'll also see a real demonstration of how credentials can be stolen when browsing is done unsafely. Finally, we are going to discuss solutions you can implement so that you are safe while browsing the World Wide Web.
What I'm going to be showing you in this video is that your passwords and other information that you pass in to HTTP sites can be intercepted and then stolen from you very easily. So now I'm going to go to an HTTP site called Web Scraper. I'm going to turn on some program called Wireshark to observe what's happening in the network. So I'm basically sniffing for the traffic that you're sending into the website, and then I'm going to filter through it and find what I'm interested in. So I'm going to pretend to be logging in with a password and a username admin and then some password that I chose at random, and I'm going to submit it to this website. I'm going to show you that using Wireshark I can easily find what password you submitted and then steal it. So here I am, I have all this traffic. You can see all these green events are basically packets that you send to this website. I'm going to filter through them looking for a password. And you can see at the very bottom, I have the password that was passed in. And this can happen in all sorts of situations. If you open up an open network, like, I don't know, McDonald's, Starbucks, whatever it is, it's unsecured, and you go to an HTTP site, someone can listen in and steal the credentials that you're passing in. Next, I'm going to show you the same thing, but this time with an HTTPS site to show you that it's not going to work. The same trick is not going to capture the credentials. So I go to Hotmail, and then I'm going to open up Wireshark again. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to capture the traffic that you're sending. I'm going to pretend to log in. I'm going to pass in my username, and then I'm going to pass in my password, and I'm going to try the same exact method of stealing the credentials as I did earlier for the HTTP site. Go in, filter, and search for a password. Let's try that, and you'll see that I don't get anything. I'm not able to steal the credentials, and that's because you're using HTTPS. So keep this in mind. Make sure you are using a secure connection.
You may have noticed while browsing a little padlock on the left side of your search bar. You may also have noticed some green color or red color, and sometimes a message about browsing securely or browsing insecurely on a specific web page. What you're seeing is basically your browser telling you whether you're using HTTPS or HTTP. And how you should think of it is HTTPS is basically HTTP, that is secure. That's what the S should stand for in your mind. And when we say secure, we mean that the traffic that you send to that website is encrypted, meaning it is encoded, sent in a way that looks like some sort of code that's difficult to decipher. And in particular, that means that anyone who is listening in on your network, including the network owner, anyone else that manages to infiltrate the network, or even in the case of an open network, if they are able to get your communication with the website, they won't be able to easily decipher what you are sending because it's encrypted. This is especially important if you're going to be sending your credentials, like if you're shopping online and you're sending your credit card information. You definitely don't want anyone to be able to capture that, so you want to make sure you're using HTTPS. So the basic practical lesson here is always look for that padlock, always look for the letters HTTPS, always look for messages that are telling you that you're browsing securely. In this lesson, I want to give you several important guidelines for how to browse the internet and remain secure. The first, and actually the most important guideline, is to avoid shady, suspicious, crime-related, unusual websites. This means websites that offer things like pirated software, websites that discuss illegal hacking, websites that deal with illegal drugs, as well as websites that have large odds of being scammed. If you just avoid all these types of websites and similar shady websites, you will probably reduce your risk by 95%. Next piece of advice is only submit personal information to HTTPS sites. So if, for instance, you want to purchase a book by some author, but the author has an outdated website that is in HTTP, I'd recommend, instead of proceeding, to contact the author or their website administrator to see if they can change the website to HTTPS. It's really not that difficult to have your website in HTTPS. So that's another piece of advice I'd recommend. Stay safe, don't send your personal information to HTTP websites. Next, to minimize the risk and possible damage of identity theft and any other type of similar breach of your personal information, you should review your personal accounts, your bank, your credit, any other things you might have as regularly and as frequently as possible.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. This is a dangerous time.
If something looks unusual, investigate, find out if there's some unusual charge. If your credit score is not what it should be, investigate and find out, because these things tend to only escalate and get worse. So you want to catch them early and fix them with the minimum amount of effort and cost on your part. Next, in general, both for your convenience and for your safety, set up a pop-up blocker. Maybe it can be an extension in your browser, or it can be part of your antivirus, but in any case, set one up. The first advantage is obvious, that you don't have to deal with pop-ups, but also from a safety perspective, you have to know that pop-ups do contain various ways for you to get infected with malware. They can redirect you to imposter websites, so it's best to have these blocked to make your life easier and safer. Next, whenever you are in public, maybe you're in a hotel, maybe you're in a McDonald's, a Starbucks, university campus, whatever it is, be careful about your information when you're accessing such an open network. So these networks will be different from the secured ones in that you'll see the writing open when you're looking at them. You'll also get a message that says that other people might be able to see your info over this network. And in fact, it's really easy to do that. Literally, just like you saw the bad guy moment where someone is able to grab credentials that are sent via HTTP, almost the same can be done when people are browsing an open network. A hacker simply joins the network, turns on Wireshark, grabs packets, that is information that's being sent over the internet, finishes up for the day, saves all the packets to their computer, goes home or wherever, leaves the site, and now they have all the information that was sent in the network over the duration of the day. And that means the credentials are being sent and transferred, pictures are being viewed, websites are being viewed, emails. So you want to be very careful about open networks. And one thing to note is that even if you do have to log into this network, that still doesn't mean that it's secure. What I mean by that is that if the hotel required you to log in, it can still be an open network. So look for those words secured, just like I showed you earlier, instead of open. Now, one of the ways you can make yourself more anonymous, even if you're on such a network, is to use something called a VPN. Basically, you should think of a VPN as a private tunnel that you have dug for yourself to the VPN provider. So you're connecting directly to your VPN provider, and no one can see your communication with the VPN provider. And then from the VPN provider, the browsing goes back to normal, but everything is coming out of the VPN provider. So they can't really spy on you. So again, you have a direct and private connection to the VPN provider, and after that you continue browsing as normal, but all the browsing looks like it's coming out of the VPN provider, so no one is able to spy on you. So in the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to set up a VPN. It's not that difficult. The theory might be a little complicated, but how to use it, very simple. So to summarize, as long as you follow these basic guidelines, you should be very safe in your internet browsing. In this lesson, I'm going to guide you on how to install a VPN and how to use it. So I'm just going to open up a browser. I'm going to look up one of the VPNs out there called TunnelBear. And what I like about this VPN is that it has a free tier, has a very cute user interface, like you can see, involving the theme of a bear. And it is well rated, so you can't really go wrong by trying this out. So what you do is just download the VPN. So once it's finished downloading, go ahead and install it. Let it install. You can see more of that bear theme. Pretty entertaining. I personally like it. And just as a reminder, basically what a VPN does is creates a private tunnel between you and the VPN provider, in this case TunnelBear. And after that, you continue browsing as if you're browsing from the VPN provider's location. So no one can really spy on you. Okay, so now it's installed. And then click Create. Basically how the VPN works is that it will be turned on. So now go to your email, verify it. And basically how the VPN works is that you just browse as normal, but all your traffic is being redirected. So there's not really any difference in how it feels to browse. Maybe it's a tiny bit slower. That's about it. So now I'm going to pick where the tunnel is, and it's going to tunnel to the US in this exact instance. And now I'm going to show you what things look like. So I'm going to type in where am I, and it looks like I'm in California, which is not the case. Now I'm going to use the tunnel to Canada, and my goal is to appear as if I'm browsing from Canada. So let's see if that works. I'm going to type in where am I again, rerun this, and now you can see it appears as if I am in Canada. So that is some of the privacy that a VPN provides you with. Now you can check out some of the settings. So you can launch it on startup, that's nice. Some more complicated settings. There is an option to make sure that even while you're connecting, you're staying secure. There's an option to automatically start it for certain networks, and on and on. Welcome to what is, in my view, the most interesting section, the section on keeping hackers out. In this section, we are going to understand the mind of a hacker. We're going to understand what hackers look for, how they operate, and the type of damage that they can cause. In particular, we're going to discuss what is easy for hackers and what is hard for hackers, so that you can make the lives of hackers hard and your own easy. I'm going to show you how hackers can take over electronic devices even at large distances, and we are going to discuss the process which hackers take when they are attacking a target. Then we'll take advantage of this knowledge to establish a system of defenses that will help you be more secure in the face of malicious actors. With that in mind, let's get started. In this video, I'm going to show you a real-life scenario of a hacking. So a neighbor is playing loud music in the middle of the night. Be clear, I'm not condoning the actions of anyone in this video. Not the neighbor, not the hacker, no one. This is meant to show you how easy it is to get hacked. So now he's connected to the neighbor's stereo. And as you can see, the music was shut off from that far away, that easily. Welcome. In this lesson, we're going to be detailing the cyber kill chain. The cyber kill chain was developed in Lockheed Martin and is a classical model for how cyber attacks take place. If you understand how hackers operate, you can secure yourself in the most effective ways so as to make their job difficult. Now keep in mind, no security system will ever be perfect. It's well known, well understood, well agreed upon that no matter how much security you have, a persistent enough, a determined enough attacker will find a way. The analogy that is commonly used is a medieval castle. It might have a moat, it might have walls, it might have an army guarding it. But no matter what, with a persistent enough attacker, it will fall one way or another. It might be due to a lack of resources from a siege. That would be like a denial of service attack. It could be because someone from the city, from the castle, has opened the gates. That would be like an insider threat. Or it can be because one of the walls isn't soundly supported and easily falls. That would be like a software that's not up to date. In any case, our goal is always to make the job of the attacker so difficult that it's not worthwhile. We're never striving for perfection because we can never reach it. As a normal day-to-day user, just like myself, our basic goal is just to cover and be protected from the most common non-specialized threats out there, and that's good enough. So now let's discuss the cyber kill chain. It has 7 steps. The first step is called reconnaissance. During reconnaissance, the hacker gathers as much relevant information as possible about their target. So if they plan on breaching an organization, they might find out who the employees are, what their email addresses are, what the usernames do they use, what are their social networks. They might research what software is being used by the organization. For instance, are they using the Microsoft Suite, Google Suite, something else? They might sniff out which ports are open. They might learn who has administrative privileges, who has keys to which part of the building. They might go dumpster diving for any information they can find, any personal information that wasn't shredded. They might look up tax records. They might start calling in to see who's working when, to see who is a weak link in the chain. They might drive by, they might map the network, they might observe how people work and what they do and what breaks they take and who is vigilant and who is not. They might research things just using search engines. So that is reconnaissance. The hacker gathers as much information as possible to facilitate the upcoming attack. In the medieval castle analogy, this is like finding out how many troops, where they patrol, what kind of walls, how high walls are, is there a moat, how deep the moat is there someone who will be bribed to open up the gates, how many provisions do they have, how long will they withstand the siege, what weapons they have, and on and on. The next stage of the kill chain is called weaponization. During weaponization, the hacker takes advantage of all the observed vulnerability. For instance, they might create some malware. It might be a custom phishing email. It might be a Word document with a macro that will be opened. For instance, they might know that the person in the front desk reads all Word documents that relate to their boss's account or something like that. So they will create a Word document specifically to weaponize this knowledge. It might be PDF attachments. It might be lockpicks that are specially designed for the situation at hand. So weaponization is about custom making tools to take advantage of vulnerabilities. Step 3, delivery, is basically sending the phishing email or dropping USBs in the parking lot or any other way in which the payload can be delivered. Step 4, exploitation, is when the malware begins executing on the victim's system, or maybe a job is scheduled in terms of computing, like you schedule some time for some operation to take place, in this case some malicious operation. So a hacker might gain access to your computer and then specify that in 8 days at 4 p.m. to begin executing this malicious script, and malicious script is going to cause all sorts of problems. Step 5, installation, is when the malware installs itself into the system. It might also download additional software, so maybe the initial malware is kind of like just a skeleton without all the accompanying destructive code, but now it's going to download all this destructive code from the network. It can be also the disabling of local security or hiding the malware, and just in general getting deeper and more difficult to stop. Step 6, command and control, allows the attacker to control the threat remotely. So the attacker might be somewhere in a different country, completely safe, but they can go onto their own device and remotely control the threat that's in your network. And finally is actions on objectives. So this depends on the objectives of the hacker. So it could be data exfiltration, denial of service, or just destruction, depends what they want. So to give you a few real examples, in the case of data exfiltration, the malware might be interested in organizational proprietary data such as engineering designs or other information like social security numbers, bank account numbers, and then this threat that was installed in the organization will basically exfiltrate all this information. In the case of denial of service, you might think of the Ukrainian power outage of December 2015, where the malware disabled some infrastructure which resulted in disruption of services. And in the case of destruction, it might be something like the famous Stuxnet worm, which was used to disable nuclear operations. So for us as users, it's useful to think of all these steps and see what preventative measures we can take at each step. For instance, for reconnaissance, how can you make your information more confidential? How can you hide any vulnerabilities that you might have? Can you avoid going on open networks? Can you minimize the amount of information you're sharing online? For weaponization, can you keep your software up to date so that it's harder to find a vulnerability in your software? For delivery, can you reduce the likelihood that you'll click a phishing email or insert a USB or download something malicious? For exploitation, can you find ways to check that nothing unusual is going on in your device? For instance, installing a good antivirus might clue you that something is off. It might tell you that there is some activity going on that shouldn't be happening. For installation, can you monitor that nothing is being downloaded that shouldn't be downloaded onto your network? For command and control, can you blacklist all unknown, unauthorized access to your devices? And then for actions on objectives, can you think of what a malicious actor might want from you or your organization, and then try to defend against it before it happens? So that's how we use the cyber kill chain to increase our security. You may have encountered security questions before when setting up some account. Usually, as you set up your username, your password, maybe your email, and other information, you'll also be asked to select a few security questions and to type in the corresponding answers. And security questions can be something like, what is the name of your first boyfriend, girlfriend? What is the model and make of your first car? Which school did you go to? Your mother's maiden name? And other personal questions. The reasoning behind these security questions is obviously that you'll know the answer to these, and if you get locked out of your account, you can use them to recover your access. Additionally, it is expected that no one else will know the answers to these security questions. Presumably, no one else knows the make and model of your first car. However, this is where I would advise caution. The reality is that motivated attackers can learn these things. For instance, if you use your mother's maiden name as part of your security questions, be cognizant that an attacker could befriend you or your mom on Facebook and find out her maiden name. Similarly, if it's the high school you went to or your year of graduation, all these things can be found out through some intelligent information gathering through your Facebook or your online presence or other means possibly paid for. So do keep in mind that hackers could investigate these questions and find out the answers and then get access to your account. They could go and see what years most of your friends on Facebook graduated and then extrapolate what year you graduated. They could go for this type of trouble. They often do this routinely, so you have to be cautious about it. So select your security questions in a way that makes it difficult for anyone to find out the answer, and hopefully you're the only one who knows this answer. In this lesson, we are going to talk about some tools and techniques for keeping cyber intruders out of your network. The first and most important primary tool that anyone should use is a firewall. Basically, a firewall is an application that looks at traffic on the network that's coming in or out. It's coming in and coming out and decides whether this traffic should be allowed or should be stopped. And as you configure the firewall, this means you can select who can come in and who cannot into your network. So this means you can deny access to your network to, for example, unknown IPs in a different country. IPs from, let's say, Russia or China or Brazil or some other country that you're not expecting to have any access from. In addition, if it happens that some malware got a hold of your device, got a hold of your computer, it might start downloading things or exfiltrating data, for instance, your usage, to the outside world. A firewall would be able to detect this traffic and then stop it. So when it comes to preventing intrusions, firewalls are one of the best tools out there. And in the next lesson, we are going to install one so you can be safe and secure from hackers. So you can be safe and secure from intruders. Now, the other piece of advice is this. If you're not using something, turn it off or remove it. So what I mean here is, for instance, if you have a printer connected to the Wi-Fi, or maybe it has its own network, but you're not currently using the printer, turn it off. If you have Bluetooth on, but you're not currently using it, turn it off. If you have some ports that are open in your computer, turn them off. If you don't know what that means, probably it's best not to worry about that. But the reasoning is that when you leave these devices on, they give hackers one more possible foothold to get into your network, if not to mention simply hacking those devices. You've seen in the bad guy moment how someone can easily take over your stereo, but someone could use the stereo to jump off into the rest of your network. So for that reason, it is good security practice to turn everything off that's not being used, lock it up, put it out of sight, and don't leave any openings to your network. So with these two principles, getting a firewall and shutting things off, you should be safe and protected from almost all basic risks. So just go ahead, select next, download it, install it, do all of that. Now there are more advanced firewalls. They can be in different places in your network. They can be your personal one, they can be for the whole network, they can be for parts of the network, they can be in hardware and software. There are all sorts of variations out there. And the firewalls themselves can be smarter or simpler. They can use machine learning, they can use rules, they can use just what you tell them to. But for the everyday user like you and me, just installing this and having it run properly is a great start. So keep installing it, figure it. Go ahead and finish the installation. And now we have the Zone Alarm firewall installed, and you can see it is protecting us from intrusions. So ideally you have your firewall, it's working in the background, and when some connection takes place, it asks you and you say yes, proceed, or no, deny. And that's how a firewall works. Pretty simple, yet very much an essential part of security.